We are close to the end of summer. Everybody's getting back to their normal rhythms. I hope you had some great adventures over the summer. We did. I'm already thinking about next summer, and we're going to talk about how to plan a vacation for next summer in our Hot Topic segment here on the Retirement Answer Man Show. So my name is Roger Whitney. I am your host, and in the event you've not listened before, welcome. This is a show dedicated to helping you not just simply survive retirement financially. We want you to rock it. Yeah, I like this Tennessee strum. So this is the last week of August's theme of answering listener questions, and Nicole's going to come on in a little bit to help us do that. And we're also going to explore in our Hot Topic segment, how do we rent a house to create the kind of experiences we want, either on vacation or in retirement? Got some tips for you there, but we can't do any of that until we have that all-important disclaimer. Hey all, this is real simple. Don't take advice from me. One, I'm not your advisor. I only give advice to clients I work for as a fiduciary. Really, don't take advice from anybody that doesn't know you. You got to think of this as helpful hints and education. And before you make any decisions, talk to your legal advisor, your tax advisor, your financial advisor. That's just common sense, right? For sure. All right, let's go figure out how to. So two things real quick. One is, I was talking with a client the other day, early in retirement, and he was telling me how they did a Disney vacation with over 20 people in their family. You had kids, you had grandkids, the kitchen sink, I don't know. And it was an amazing experience. And they talked about the experiential part of hosting everyone and gathering them together in Disney World, in this case, being the hub. And they didn't really spend all their time in the parks. It was having everyone together in a house, or I can't remember if it was one house or a couple houses, must be a couple for that many, but close together so they could have dinners, play games, have chats that don't always happen as easily around a holiday or a birthday where there's so much other stuff going on. The point was, a big value for them is creating experiences with the ones that they love. So another way of saying that is creating memories with the ones that they love. I think back when my mom passed away, I was 22 and I inherited a little bit of money. I think it was $14,000 when I was 22 years old. I remember because I bought Philip Morris and I bought Euro Disney thinking that was going to be the thing, and it wasn't. But anyway, the $14,000 that I received as an inheritance, I got as a check that came in the mail from an attorney's office about a year or so after my mom's passing. There wasn't much connection to those dollars and my mom. And a lot of us are in situations, we're blessed with situations through a lot of hard work and good luck and all sorts of things, where most likely we will die with more money than we ever need. And so one thing we talk about in our practice is, why not use some of that money in a prudent way to create experiences for the people you love and speak into their life while you're there to enjoy it and help create those experiences? Because I tell you, that $14,000 inheritance I got from my mom, if that had been spent on a trip to China or whatever, and we had time together and experiences together, that would have meant so much more and would have been with me the rest of my life, much more than the check I got. And so we talk about those type of things, and this client is living that out, which is beautiful. And you can even think about these things in your work life. So I'm going to share some things with you. I've worked and built a business that I serve, and I work with clients that I just love walking life with them. But I also built the business to serve my aspirations for my family. And one of those has been, with my wife and I, is the ability to be somewhat location independent, meaning that I don't have to go to the same office and do the same thing and have that be a requirement for what I do. And it took a long time, but I work with wonderful people all over the country. I think like 23 states, I can't remember. And they don't care where I'm at, because it works, because we do video meetings and I'm traveling to Michigan later this year and I'm going to drive so I can meet people that I've never met in person. And so what we did a month or so ago is we booked a house in one of my favorite cities in the country, Salida, Colorado, for a month next year in the summertime. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to be working. For me, I'll be working, but we're going to be able to hike every day, mountain bike every day, and be in a different area and still keep life going. So I'm in a work mode, and it's easier when you're an entrepreneur. I get that, but it's that time flexibility that we value most, and we've talked about that. And what I found in booking that month is the first thing we did is we reached out to people that we love and said, hey, we're going to be here on these dates. We would love for you to come through, spend time in our house, and we can hang together. So you end up being the host, but not at your own house. So we're going to have, I think it's, wow, we've asked a lot of people. So right now, I think it's at least 5 or so different families to come spend a few days with us in this house that will support having them in the house because it sleeps like 8. So, and I'll tell you the cost. We went through, I think, HomeAway, and this house that sleeps 8. It's fairly new. It's right near downtown. Not quite the prime time in summer Colorado, but still, it's going to be beautiful. I think it was like $4,300 for the month, and I'll be able to work from there. So think of that when you're in retirement. A big value is obviously travel. We hear that all the time. But another big value is spending time with family. So like this client that I mentioned, how do you go about doing that? How do you facilitate that when everybody is so busy? And I think this is one way that you can do that. So what I want to do is just talk about some tips in renting vacation rentals. So you might be able to facilitate creating either experiences for you and your immediate family or for extended people to come around. So tip number 1 is there are a lot of resources out there. There's HomeAway, there's VRBO, there's Airbnb. Look at multiple resources. They're going to have a lot of the same listings, but they're going to have different reviews and there may be different descriptions to try to give you a full 360 view of what the potential rental looks like, because it's hard because you're never going to see this thing, right? 2 is you got to book these in advance. That's why we're talking about it now. You know, we're already talking about next summer and booking so you can get the dates that make sense for you, but also make sense for whoever you want to have come visit. And then 3rd is you want to define, okay, what is it that you want? You know, what is it you're trying to do with this? When my wife and I were booking this house, originally it was going to be a smaller house because it's just going to be the 2 of us and our dogs and our kids may come. But for really not that much more, we were able to get a house that slept 8 comfortably, which allowed us to start extending invitations. So you want to know what it is you're envisioning doing in this house. So even if it had fallen apart and really nobody could come visit, we still would have had a house that we were comfortable in. And it didn't really cost that much more money. So you want to know what is your purpose with this house. Now, a 4th tip is you want to search around the busy seasons. So depending on the area that you're looking at going to or the time of year, there are some pretty hard busy seasons where in hot season, the rates are this. But if you can plan your vacation either just before or just after what is considered the busy season based on whatever service you're using, you can save some money and still get most of the kind of weather and experience that you want. And alternatively, hey, if you're comfortable going someplace that's not quote unquote perfect weather because you bring the happiness with you and the weather with you, then you can definitely do that a lot cheaper. The 5th tip is read all the reviews. What I've seen in reviews, because all these sites, Airbnb, HomeAway, they have a lot of reviews. And normally you want to have a good breadth of reviews. Most of them are going to cluster around 5-star. It was the best thing we ever saw. And it sucked. That's my experience. But even if they're 5 stars, it's important that you read the reviews because they'll tell you little things within their commentary that might be important to your family that really wasn't important to them. So I suggest you read all the reviews. And that's one reason why you want to use different sources is because different reviews may be on different platforms. Another tip, and I think someone gave this to me and I think it's a good idea, is when you're looking at a property, obviously you're going to look at the photos and some have better photos than others. And you're going to look at all the different rooms, but go to Google Earth and look at the overhead of the house to see the entire lot and how it looks from, well, I guess a satellite, right? And then you can see the surrounding area meaning what's right next door to it. Maybe 2 doors down is a beautiful park, or maybe 2 doors down is an industrial complex. I don't know, but that could be important. And that Google Earth is going to give you a great perspective. Another thing you can do on Google Earth, which I think is cool, is you can go to street level and get their photo of the front of the house and then do a 360 so you can look around the entire street. And maybe you do that with in a square radius of the actual property to get a real feel for a place that you're going to. I think it'll just give you a different perspective rather than the photos that are staged for you in, the search listing that you see. The next tip is talk to the owners. And a good question to ask, and I saw this online, is ask them about the weaknesses. Just an open-ended question and be quiet, because usually they're going to promote it up, but they may just mention something in passing that might be important to you. Oh, we got this neighbor. Sometimes they're loud. You never know what they're going to say. Open-ended questions like that are always good. Another tip, especially if you're going to bring family in or have them come in to partake in your little adventure, is consider the logistics of travel. To get to this cabin that you're renting, how easy will it be to get to for your family? I mean, if your family is mostly on the West Coast and you're renting a house in Florida, well, that's some logistical stuff to think about, right? You might want to be more convenient for them. You might want to be within a couple hours of the big airport. I think it's in Cincinnati. I got to fly into Denver, and it's about 2.5 hour drive. So it's a little bit of a drive, but it's somewhat centrally located. So if you really want to invite people, think of the, priority people and make it easy for them to get there. And some of that will have to do with the logistical part, but the other part will be some places are less expensive to fly to than others, right? I'm here in Dallas, Fort Worth. For me to fly to Atlanta or Nashville, it doesn't cost anything. But for me to fly other places, it gets a little bit more expensive. So those are things that you can consider. And then this is an interesting thing, because we found this when we were looking at the houses. A lot of times they're going to say, hey, it sleeps 9. Go through room by room and see how they calculate that, because a lot of these will have futons and things like that. And you may be able to fit 9 in there, but you might be falling over each other. So my suggestion is be wary of how many, quote unquote, they say that it sleeps. And I think these kind of rules, and I'm sure I'll get some suggestions from listeners that we'll try to share, I think can help you think a little bit differently about, hey, if I'm going to go on vacation, or if I'm financially secure enough, how can I create experiences with people that I love and facilitate that? Because usually you got to have a ringleader. You got to have somebody that's a hub for it. And maybe you can be it. And maybe you can create experiences with your people that you care about that they'll remember forever. So let's go talk to Nicole now. All right, here we are in the last week of a 5-week month where we're answering listener questions. And to help us along is the one, the only, the rock star, Nicole.
Woo!
Welcome back to the show, Nicole.
Thanks.
So we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do about all the other listener questions we didn't have a chance to get to. Maybe that we'll do that in the community. If we get enough interest to launch that, that might be fun.
That would be fun.
Now, next month, the theme is going to be housing and relocation near in retirement. There seems to be this common theme, Nicole, that when someone is retiring, they're rethinking the rest of their lives in a lot of ways. And they almost want to re-nest. They either want to downsize, they want to move to a different state, they want to sell everything and go in an RV. I've seen that. Or they want to buy a second home that is sort of a partial home that they float back and forth. And I've seen this done very well. And I've seen it done very poorly. And these are big financial decisions. Early in retirement, I get the list, but if you list the top stressful things, retirement is one of them and moving is another one. So a lot of people end up trying to do both really close to each other. So we're going to navigate over the month of September, how to do that in a healthy way. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome.
But for now, we are getting to questions. What do we got, Nicole?
Our first question comes from Paul, and he writes in, I will be 70 years old in July of 2019. I understand I'll be required to take my first RMD by April of 2020. And then I'll be required to take my second RMD by December of 2020. That means I have a tax issue where both RMDs will be included as ordinary income in 2020. Are there any strategies I can employ prior to filing my taxes for that year?
So I am not a CPA and I don't give tax advice. Talk to a CPA to get this. But let's go through the timeline here, Paul. You're going to be 70 in July of 2019. The IRS says that you need to take your first required minimum distribution no later than April 1st of the year after you turn not 70, but 70 and a half. So if you're going to be 70 in July of 19, your first required minimum distribution that you have to take is in 2020, but you have the choice of delaying that until April 1st of 2021. Now, even though they give you that 3-month extension, I never use it. I have never used it in my practice because if you go into 2021, then you'll get the scenario that you're outlining. Well, basically, you're going to have 2 distributions in the same year, which is going to ramp up your taxable income. So based on the facts that you've given me, my understanding is that you can take your first distribution in 2020, the year that you actually turn 70 and a half, and then your next distribution isn't going to be required until 2021. So that would be how I would approach that. And, definitely talk to a tax guy to confirm what I'm giving you because I'm about a 90% on that because I'm not a tax guy.
All right. Our next question is an audio question from Barry.
Hi, Roger. Love your podcast. My question is, let's say that you're planning to retire in a year or two and your confidence ratio looks real good. And then a market correction hits shortly before retirement. What do you do then? Do you have to work longer till things look better? Should you save the first several years in cash so that you don't have to worry about the market immediately after retire? Or what do you recommend? Thank you.
That's a great question, Barry. And it's one of the big fears that we all have, right? Is all this uncertainty of feeling like we're okay. So we have this confidence level using some tool. But what happens if we get a 20% haircut on our assets? Where does that confidence level go? Because that confidence level is like a compass reading. It's going to change day by day based on not just the markets, but your spending and all the other assumptions that go into it. So here's how I approach it. Well, from an overall umbrella standpoint, that's why I believe in agile retirement management, just because you got to identify issues early so you can mitigate whatever damage so you can try to stay on course. You got to be really agile, which means you're testing a lot. But let's talk about this market, drawdown right at retirement. So number one is I'm a big believer that in any time of change or uncertainty, it's probably pretty good idea to get a little bit more conservative. And we had Michael Kitces on. Wow, this is a couple of years ago. We'll have to address this more. But when I'm working with a client that's within a year or so of retirement, one thing we talk about in our pre-retirement checklist is getting more conservative from an investment allocation during the time of change to help mitigate or avoid exactly what you're talking about. Doesn't mean that once you get into retirement, you find your sea legs, you figured out this new phase of life, then you get back to a neutral allocation that is your target. But I like to get a lot more conservative when you're about to enter retirement to help avoid this exact thing. I always think about when I used to do adventure races and I would, be running in these very muddy, unstable grounds where everything is changing. You widen your stance and you take little baby steps as you run. I think when you're in a period of transition, it's good from a portfolio standpoint to get more conservative, and then later on, you can get back to neutral. That's number one. Number two, you should be stress testing. What would happen if you had a market meltdown? How bad would your confidence level change? That's an important thing. You want to know what might happen. Number three is, I would start building the cash reserve buckets for the money that you're going to need to start taking from your portfolio. So you do have that. In my world, it's a 2-year buffer before you actually have to sell risk assets. And lastly, Nicole, that's one reason why I'm a huge fan of pre-retirement, where you gain more life freedom, but you still have your foot in the door in some type of work and some type of cash flow. So if the world just smacks you in the face, you can adjust and have more options at your disposal. So That's what I would do, Barry.
Sounds like I have some old episodes to dig up for Six Shot Saturday.
Yeah, I could see her eyes going, oh boy, I got to link to that.
Our next question is from Kimberly, and it's also an audio question.
Okay, Kimberly, what do you got?
Hello, Roger. My name is Kimberly, and I live here in Texas. And
Woo!
I'm 55. I'll be inheriting the proceeds from the sale of a house, probably about $200,000. What things do I need to know or plan for regarding this?
That's a great question, Kimberly. And sorry that you're inheriting it, because that means somebody probably passed. But that's a blessing that you're getting $200,000. Well, from a tax perspective, you shouldn't have any issues. So really, it's what do you do with the $200,000? That's what I'm going to answer, because I think that's sort of the question. And that could be a bonus, an unexpected inflow of money. And when we have that happen, when we have anything like that happen, we want to think tactical, right? We always have to start with process, strategy, which leads to tactics, because that usually leads us to a lot better decisions. So you got to know where you're at in your life and what you're trying to accomplish over the next 3 to 5 years. And you want to know your cash flow currently, your income and your spending. And then you want to look at your net worth statement, because what you do with that $200,000, a lot of that's going to be determined by those two things, but also what your net worth statement looks like. So let's go through the 5 things that you can do with money. All right, you ready, Nicole?
I'm ready.
Number 1, you can spend it on lifestyle, right? That's an option of what you can do. Number 2 is you can put it into cash savings, like in a bank account, as cash reserves for whatever reason, just earn, risk-free rate of return. Number 3 is you can pay down debt. That's an option to do with money. Number 4 is you can give it away to a wonderful charity or to Roger. Number 5 is you can invest it to work towards something you're trying to accomplish in the future. Those are really the only 5 things you can do with money. Can you think of anything else, Nicole?
I cannot.
Okay. So when you're trying to figure out what do we do with this $200,000, okay, where do you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years? What's important to you? Looking at your net worth statement, do you have debt that you need to pay off? Do you have ample cash reserves? Do you have things in your life that you would like to do now, or that you think the person that gifted you the money or that named you, is there something that they would like you to do with that money that you think would honor them? And that could be in a lifestyle standpoint, or it also could be charitable giving. And then anything that falls below the line of the first 4 is longer term investment. And then that's a whole nother decision set. So that sounds like a roundabout answer, Kimberly, but that is the process that I go through when we're trying to figure out what to do with money, whether it's an inheritance or whether it's cash that we're set is. You got to go through the process to get to a strategy, which is going to lead you to a decision of what to do with the money that is going to actually help you move forward. What most people do, in my experience, is they have a pain point. I got all this money. What do I do with it? And they don't even create the right context, and they duct tape it. They buy something that makes sense to them, whether it's an investment product, or they just intuitively make the decision. And it's possible that decision could be counterproductive towards where they say they want to go from a life perspective because they didn't go through the right process. So I'm a big believer in that, because process leads to better decisions. So hopefully that gives you some context there, Kimberly.
And we have one more audio question. Are you so happy? We've had so many audio questions this month.
It's nice to hear people's voices. Yeah.
This one's from Mike.
Hey, Roger. My name's Mike. I'll be 59 in a couple days. Plan on retiring at 59 and a half, hopefully. Got turned on to your podcast about a week ago, just searching podcasts, and found it very informative. Learned a lot on Social Security, retirement planning. One thing I haven't found on your podcast, I don't know if I just haven't found it yet, but I have heard no mention of annuities. Just would like your take on annuities, good, bad, or indifferent. Thank you, Roger.
You're right, Mike. I really haven't touched deeply on annuities for a couple reasons. Number 1 is, for a good period of time, from a regulatory standpoint, it was problematic for me to do that. That is no longer the case. And the second reason is, man, are they complicated. Understanding an annuity contract is like trying to understand the ingredients on a Twinkie. It's hard to recognize all the words, and it's said in such a weird way. So if you look at the back of a Twinkie or a ding dong and you see tons of words you can't understand, imagine that, but like 100 pages of that to understand exactly how they operate. So I think of investing in finding a solution for, living this life you want to lead here in a year or so. Like I think of your health. If you take away all the mumbo jumbo of nutrition, a good rule of thumb is eat food and try to limit eating food product, right? Product is the things like a Twinkie, things that have a lot of other stuff in them that you don't know what they are. As organic as you can be, usually you can't go too wrong in that. I mean, obviously, there are exceptions to that. Well, I think it's the same way about investing. Investing and building a portfolio to help you get to where you want to go as a family, as close as you can stay to true investments and not, quote unquote, investment products. The less expensive they'll likely be, the less complicated they'll likely be, the more flexibility you'll have in terms of what you can do with them down the road. You're going to have. And annuities don't fit a lot of those. They're very expensive typically. They're very complicated to understand, and they're extremely easy to get into, and they're very hard to get out of. And there are a lot of different types of annuities. You got fixed annuities, you got indexed annuities, you got variable annuities, and they all sound great in the brochures and in the sales presentation. And in my experience, they never actually work or are used in the way that they're originally sold. Meaning, usually nobody's turning on the income, especially with variable annuities. And I've been dealing with some of this in my practice with clients that have had them, is that when you get to the point where you're gaming turning on the income stream or not, you realize, because usually this is a little later in life, Mike, you realize, wow, for a very long period of time, I'm really just getting my money back. And there's a break even of when you actually start getting an ROI on a return on investment on the actual product. So you're right. I haven't talked about them, but we're going to do an entire month on them. And Nicole's rolling her eyes and she's like, okay, I got to figure out where to put this. We are going to do an entire month on them. And I've been avoiding them mainly because from a regulatory standpoint, which I've cleared that part up, but they're actually sort of complicated. So
I don't know if we want to spend a whole month on you talking about something you don't really like. That sounds...
Well, they do have their place, right?
Could be a rough month.
Yeah, they could be Mr. Negative for the month. No, they do have their place in certain situations, but they're not the first tool you want to pull out, in my opinion. They help with longevity. They give people a peace of mind. They may help someone invest in a more moderate or growth-oriented stance than they otherwise would be comfortable with. But those are some general thoughts, Mike. And you're right. We may not be an entire month, but we'll dive into a month of understanding the different types. We could easily do a month on that.
Okay.
All right. Can we go get happy?
Let's get happy.
Hey, welcome to the Happy Lab. We're noodling on how to live a happier life. And I read this happened a few weeks ago, actually, Nicole. The 50 millionth Mustang rolled off the line. That's a lot of Mustangs, Ford Mustangs. That is. And I've seen some things on the internet and about what was your first car. And so I was thinking about my first car. So quick story about my first car. It was a 1972 Volkswagen Carmen Ghia, which is a pretty cool car. Except, and I think I talk about it in the book, actually.
In the book.
Yeah, okay. So the story's in the book, but I went on a date once and the bumper fell off and I had to get out and tie the bumper back up and I was all sweaty and, well, it's a quirky car. But it made me go think back to my first car. So what was your first car, Nicole?
I drove my mom's 1987 Buick LeSabre for a while. And it was the kind that had the textured fabric seats. So when you got up, the little squares on the fabric were imprinted in the back of your legs.
See, that's a good story. That's
awesome.
The most fun, we're in the Happy Lab. So the car that I had the most fun with was I had this huge, this is back in the late 80s, I had this huge orange Suburban. And in Michigan, the Department of Transportation drove these huge orange Suburbans. And it was one that had gone through the ringer and we bought used. And it was a beast. And the thing that was most fun about that is everybody got out of my way and I could run over things and curbs and speed bumps and never stop. We used to have so much fun in that because we just didn't care about it. It's probably the best thing for a teenager because you're not going to get hurt in it. But anyway, so I wonder what your first car was and what was the car that you had the most fun with? That's cool to think about that stuff. That makes me happy.
Fun. Yeah.
All right, let's go set a smart sprint.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a 7-day goal to take a little tiny baby step to create a great life. So here's my suggestion for the next 7 days. If you haven't done this already, we didn't talk about this in the show, but I think this is important. We're about to enter the beginning of September. Woohoo! We got 3 or 4 more months of the year, but it's important that you know what your realized capital gains are in your taxable accounts. Because one thing I like to do in September, October is know what our realized capital gains are, because that's going to be a tax liability. You'll have to pay taxes on those. But also, knowing that number can help you strategize, whether it's in rebalancing your portfolio or doing some tax planning to try to neutralize some of those gains by maybe realizing some losses so you can have less tax at the end of the year. So it's a good time to do that. So why don't you just check out what your realized capital gains are in your taxable accounts over the next 7 days. Nicole, I am ready for August to be over because it's freaking hot. I am tired of the dog days of summer. So we're about to enter September. I'm excited about that. People are getting back into normal. Nicole is already happier because her kids are in school.
No, because it is coming up on 2 years of professional bliss working with you, obviously.
What day is it? The workiversary, I think you call it, right?
Yes. It's right after Labor Day weekend.
Okay. Well, I have no doubt you have reminders on my calendar out the wazoo. I never have to worry about missing any important date in your life because you make sure I know. I'm just kidding. I like our workiversary. It's been, is it 2 years? Wow. You're awesome.
It's a compliment to you that I think that it's worth noting.
Well,
maybe I should reassess.
Anybody that's ever talked to me knows that all I do is brag and say how awesome you are. So you know that.
Thank you.
And you know what? You guys are awesome too. I want to thank you for listening. Nicole and I love every little interaction that we have with you. And we feel pretty honored that we're all work together and we're a little part of it to help you not just survive retirement, but actually to make it fun and to rock retirement. So thanks.
We appreciate you joining us today for this episode of Retirement Answer Man. Be sure to visit rogerwhitney.com/answers to access the Retirement Answer Library with over 30 checklists to help you make the most of the only life you have. Remember, you have more power than you realize to create an amazing life starting today with Retirement Answer Man. The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Have a wonderful day.